Yo, what's going on, guys? So I just came from the gym, just hit leg day, the worst today, but it's the best for you, so you can't skip leg day. Can't miss leg day, but I'm beat, but I wanted to talk to you guys about cracking the code to being able to understand the Bible. The cheat code for the Bible and understanding the secrets of the Bible lies in the Zodiac and the 12 signs of the Zodiac within what's called astrotheology, which is something I didn't even really know was a thing until just recently, which I'm going to search up right now for you to define. Astrotheology is a field that combines the study of theology. Theology is the study of God. So it's a field that combines the study of theology with the science of astronomy and space exploration. It explores the relationship between the cosmos, humanity, and the divine, examining how our understanding of the universe can inform and shape theological concepts. This interdisciplinary approach seeks to bridge the gap between scientific discoveries and religious beliefs, particularly within Christianity. Okay? So, essentially what that means is it's using the sun, the moon, the planets, the stars, the constellations, and the zodiacs as an external visual representation of the nature of God, to help people understand the nature of God using astronomy and astrology as astrotheology, helping people to understand theology, which is the study of God. Studying God, understanding the nature of God, okay? And so I'll define astronomy versus astrology real quick, because that's essentially what astrotheology is. Astronomy and astrology are distinct fields of study with very different approaches. Astronomy is a natural science that studies celestial objects and phenomena using scientific methods. Astrology, on the other hand, is a non-scientific practice that attributes influence to the positions of celestial bodies on human affairs and events. So that's a fancy way of saying, let's use the moon as an example. Does the moon affect the tides? Yes, the moon has a significant impact on Earth's tides. The moon's gravitational pull creates tidal bulges, leading to high and low tides. The sun also influences tides, but the moon's closer proximity to Earth results in a stronger gravitational force, making it the primary driver of tides. Okay? What percent of the Earth is water? What percent of the Earth is water? Approximately 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. Okay? What percent of the human body is water? The human body is typically 55 to 60% water. So if you're telling me that the moon is the primary force behind the external tides of the ocean, then obviously, to some extent, the moon has an influence on the internal tides of our emotions, which in astrology is why the moon is typically considered feminine, in the sense that the moon is the primary influence on our emotions, our emotional or feminine side, whereas the sun is considered to be our masculine side. Okay? So I want to show you that, obviously, if the Earth is 70% water and the moon is the primary cause of the tides of the ocean externally, and the human body is 60% water, the moon is obviously the primary influence behind the internal tides of our emotions. All right? So when we talk about the difference between astronomy and astrology, astronomy, which is just the study of the planets, the moon, the sun, and their orbits and whatnot, their positions in the sky and whatnot. Astrology is telling you how their orbits and the positions in the sky are affecting you personally. Now that's the part of, let's say, astrotheology generally, that they don't want you to research into. So they'll tell you that astronomy is they'll tell you that astronomy is a legit science, but they don't want you to know that astrology is common sense as a legit science. So they put a label on it and they call it pseudoscience, false science. But obviously, as we just used our common sense to see, no shit, Sherlock, the moon has some effect on your emotions internally. If your body's 60% water and the moon is the primary force behind the tides, that means 60% of you, right, all of your emotions are essentially rooted in water, which the moon is the primary force behind. Like, let's just have a little bit of common sense here, right? So our ancestors were not cavemen. They were not idiots. They had more common sense than we do in a lot of ways. And there are conspiracies as to the things that people don't want you to know, because if you know about astrology, the more you research into astrology, the more you find out about how the Bible is all astrology. And it all has to do with the zodiac, the 12 zodiac signs, the sun and the moon, the planets, the stars, the constellations, right? So that's to give you some definitions as to like what's going on with all of that and what all that means as far as what the Bible truly is all about as astrotheology, okay? Now again, this is something that people have known for hundreds, if not thousands of years. For example, there's a very famous artist who painted a very famous painting, and that painting is The Last Supper. Leonardo da Vinci painted The Last Supper, all right? And I need you guys to search this up for yourself so that you can see. But the way that he actually painted this, right, the camera's inverted, so it's actually from your right to left is the Jesus as the sun and the 12 disciples as the 12 zodiac signs, which I'll show you in a sec. There's 4 groups of 3 disciples each, representing the 4 seasons of spring, summer, fall, winter, where in the context of the zodiac, the first day of the year is the first day of spring. And then the last day of the year is the last day of winter. No shit. And I'm going to explain why that's not the case. It should be common sense that the first day of spring would be the first day of the new year, new life, resurrection, and the last day of winter would be the last day of the year. But the reason why that's not the case is for something else I'll show you later. So that's how Jesus is the sun. You have the 4 groups of 3 disciples each as each season, spring, summer, fall, winter. Okay, as the 4 quadrants of the zodiac, 1 quadrant per season, where each quadrant of the zodiac for each season holds 3 zodiac signs each. So the best chart that I've found for the zodiac that I prefer the most is on this website called Britannica.com, and they have this purple zodiac chart if you guys want to look along to the same one as I am, right? So you can see when you take a look at it for yourself, right? There's 4 sections like a pie and 3 zodiac signs per 4 sections, okay? So one of the first instances in the Bible where we see this pattern taking place is in Genesis chapter 49, where we have this man, his name is Jacob, and he has 12 sons, and he's blessing his 12 sons, okay? Where Jacob and his 12 sons, the 12 sons of Jacob are actually the 12 signs of the zodiac, and Jacob is actually the sun. So I've made a list here that I'm going to read off real quick. And then we're going to get into why I've come to this conclusion as to why each of these sons is what zodiac, okay? So let me just take a sip of this juice real quick because I'm thirsty. Oh my God. Wow. White cran strawberry. Woo! Cranberry juice, solid drink. Wow. So, when it comes to Jacob, right? He's one of like the grandfathers of the Jews, if you will. Kind of like how George Washington's one of the founding fathers of Americans. Kind of along the same lines. But instead, it's like, imagine if all Americans were descendants of George Washington. He would be our ancestor. It's kind of like that. Throughout the Bible, it's one big family tree, okay, of the Jews. Right? And Jacob's one of the grandfathers, the founding fathers, the patriarchs of the Jews, okay? So, Jacob has 13 children in total between a few different wives, okay? He has 12 sons and 1 daughter, and which is 13 children in total. And this is my conclusion as to what I've discovered these children are in reference to each zodiac, okay? So, the only thing that I've noticed is that when it comes to Jacob and his 12 sons and then Jesus and the 12 disciples, they don't necessarily seem to be too concerned with making sure that each child or disciple is an exact representation of each sign of the zodiac in numerical order specifically. That they are based on the 12 zodiac signs in reference to the 12 zodiac signs, and they're following that pattern throughout the Bible, but it does not necessarily mean that each disciple, in Jesus's case, is specific to each sign of the zodiac. Like, for example, Jesus's disciples, there's 2 sets of brothers, and they're both fishermen. So that would make 4 fishermen in Jesus's 12 disciples, which would actually represent the zodiac sign Pisces, the 2 fish, twice. So obviously, in that regard, they're just clearly trying to put an emphasis on the zodiac sign Pisces, being that Jesus is the avatar of the astrological age of Pisces, the 2 fish. That's why there's 2 sets of fishermen. The first disciples that Jesus picks up are always the 2 fishermen, right? And there's 2 sets of brothers, there's 2 sets of fishermen, the 2 fish of the zodiac sign Pisces, which we'll get to in a second later. But that's the only heads up that I'll give you guys, is it's not going to work if you try to align these zodiac signs numerically speaking, but it will work to align at least Jacob's sons with each zodiac sign specifically, okay? So, in biblical order of Jacob's blessing, going down as you're reading it through the Bible, right? What I've concluded is that Jacob and his various wives are the sun and the earth, kind of representing like Father God and Mother Nature, okay? Then, as far as the 12 sons, we have Reuben as Aquarius, Simeon and Levi as Gemini, Judah is Leo, Zebulun is Capricorn, Issachar is Cancer, Dan is Scorpio, Gad is Aries, Asher is Libra, Naphtali is Virgo, Joseph/Manasseh is Sagittarius, Benjamin is Pisces, Ephraim is Taurus, and the 13th child, Jacob's only daughter, Dinah, is the moon. Okay? So, what we're going to do is go to Genesis 49, and we're going to go down the list, and we're going to see how this is the case. Okay? We're going to have to kind of go back and forth between the NIV version and the KJV version, because they preserve certain aspects of the original texts in different ways, which help to give us the complete picture as to what each sun represents in reference to each zodiac sign. Okay, so Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power. Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel, blah, blah, blah. All you need to see is turbulent as the waters. Now, we're going to have to do a little bit of jumping around real quick, And what we're going to have to do is jump over to the book of Numbers, right? But what I'm going to search up on Google here is the tribes of Israel tent symbols, because the 12 sons of Jacob become the 12 tribes of Israel, and that same kind of pattern is followed throughout the Bible in different ways up until the 12 disciples of Jesus, okay? Now, Jesus is called the Lion of Judah because Jesus is the descendant of King David, and King David is of the tribe of Judah, okay? Which is symbolized as a lion. So let's get into the tribes of Israel and what each tribe represents, right? Random firework kind of scared me. So the tribes of Israel each had distinct symbols associated with them, often represented on banners or flags, and these symbols were used when the tribes camped around the tabernacle. The tabernacle is quite literally the tent of the sun externally, and the tent of the sun as the temple of God. That's why these are called your temples, right? Where the word sun comes from the Latin word sol, S-O-L, representing the external sun, which is a reflection of where we get the word soul, S-O-U-L, from, which is the inner sun. The external sun or light is a reflection of the internal sun or light as the soul. The external soul, S-O-L, the external sun, is a reflection of the internal soul, S-O-U-L, the inner sun, the inner light of life as the mind of God. So, just to summarize super quick, if we use the analogy of a tree, when it comes to a tree, you have the branch and the trunk, but the branch is just the trunk as the tree of life. You have the soul and the spirit, but the soul is the spirit as the mind of God. You have the brain and the universe, but the brain is the universe as the mind of God. The branch is the trunk as the tree of life. So, the spirit is just the mind as a unified body of consciousness, and the soul is just the mind as an individualized ray of consciousness. The universe is just the mind of God in a unified state as reality, and the brain is just the mind of God in an individualized state as personality. The universe is just the mind of God when it's big. The brain is just the mind of God when it's small, which is the Garden of Eden as the soil of life, the kingdom of heaven, okay? Where God and the Word is the mind and thought, like the mouth and speech. Where God speaking things into existence is the mind thinking things into existence, which is God incarnating himself as all of existence, which is you, as creation creating itself, which makes you the creator, as the spirit and the flesh in the Bible, which is the mind and the body, mind and matter, which is heaven on earth as God in man, which is the Christ nailed to the cross at the skull of Golgotha, the temple of God, right? God incarnated as a man, the Christ in the conception, crucifixion, and resurrection of Christ is the incarnation of God, right? The crucifixion is when you are born as a mortal body. The resurrection is when you are reborn as the immortal being. That is when God became man and when man becomes God, where the crucifixion and resurrection as the birth as a mortal body and the rebirth as the immortal being are both a kind of conception, birth and rebirth. God became man and then man became God, all right? And that's what astrotheology of the Bible is really all about, using the external soul, S-O-L, the sun. It's a external visual representation of the inner soul, S-O-U-L, the inner sun, inner light of life as the mind of God, okay? And so the whole point of the Bible is the revelation of eternal life, where you recognize, right, because the mind is the universe as life itself, for something to come to life, which is resurrection, is for something to come to mind, which is recognition. And that recognition is the recognition of oneself as the immortal being in a mortal body, the Christ on the cross. and that is the revelation of eternal life as the absolute way, truth, and life of the intuition of self-knowledge. The knowledge of who I am as I am, and we're going to get into that in a second here, and you're going to see how that makes sense. So to get back to the tribes of Israel, right? Let's say this again. The tribes of Israel each had distinct symbols associated with them, often represented on banners or flags, and these symbols were used when the tribes camped around the tabernacle. As we just saw, it's essentially the body, the brain. The four primary symbols associated with the four main encampments were the lion, Judah, the man, Reuben, the ox, Ephraim, and the eagle, Dan. These symbols are also linked to the prophetic descriptions and the tribe's roles. Now, when it comes to the zodiac, there are four, or essentially most generally, there are two main things that you have to know. So just bear with me, guys. Have some patience. I'm going to try to get through this as quick as I can. There's a lot of context I have to provide. There's two main things that you have to know when it comes to the astrotheology of the Bible, which is the equinoxes and the solstices, okay? Equinoxes and solstices are astronomical events that mark the beginning of different seasons. Equinoxes, spring and fall, occur when the Earth's equator is aligned with the sun, resulting in nearly equal day and night lengths. Solstices, summer and winter, occur when the Earth's tilt is most inclined towards or away from the sun, resulting in the longest and shortest days of the year, respectively. Okay? Twice a year, when the Earth's equator is aligned with the sun, so the equinoxes is twice a year when the Earth's equator is aligned with the sun, resulting in nearly equal hours of daylight and darkness. Blah, blah. Solstices, twice a year when the Earth's axial tilt is at its maximum towards or away from the sun, which would be the summer or winter solstice, all right? So, when it comes to the zodiac, when we're talking about the tribes of Israel, they are aligned with the equinoxes and solstices. But we have to remember this was thousands of years ago, where throughout the Bible there are four main astrological ages that are being discussed. Okay, so there are two ways in which the zodiac rotates: clockwise annually and counterclockwise, let's say, universally. All right, so if we look at the zodiac, for example, right, we are currently in the astrological age of Pisces. All right, so the way that the zodiac works, the first sign of the zodiacal year begins with the first day of spring. In the astrological age of Pisces, obviously, it's the last day of Pisces season annually, where annually each zodiac sign lasts for about a month, about 30 days, all right? Let's say, universally speaking, each zodiac sign, in terms of the 12 ages of the universe, is 2,150 years each. So obviously, us being in the astrological age of Pisces, we're in the year 2025. So that means we only have about 125 years left of this current astrological age, the age of Jesus, where Jesus said he will be with us till the end of the age. So this is quite literally the end times, the last days of the astrological age of Pisces, the age of Jesus. Because this is essentially just about the last century of this age, which are the last years. The last years are the last days. These are the end times, okay? So, for example, within this current astrological age, the age of Pisces, the spring equinox is the last day of Pisces. The summer solstice is the last day of Gemini. The fall equinox is the last day of Virgo. And the winter solstice is the last day of Sagittarius. But we actually have to go back and push this back thousands of years to Joseph's time, right? So there's the astrological ages of Taurus, Aries, Pisces, and Aquarius that are covered throughout the Bible, right? Those are the ages of, let's just say, Joseph, Moses, Jesus, and then what I'll call the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, okay? So, for example, if we go to Luke 22, the paragraph of the Last Supper, Jesus is talking to his disciples about preparing for the Last Supper. The disciples say, "Where do you want us to prepare for it?" they asked. He replied, "As you enter the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him to the house that he enters." Back in Jesus' time, you would never catch a man dead holding a pitcher of water because that was a woman's task. And it was a very patriarchal era, which means it was a very, there was a lot of superiority when it came to men, okay? And that comes from Adam and Eve and whatnot, whatever. So the only man that has ever and will ever hold the pitcher of water is the man dumping out the water of Aquarius, which is Reuben. All right? The tribe of Reuben. So Jesus was prophesizing of the astrological age of Aquarius, which is to come. All right? These are the end times of the astrological age of Pisces, which is the sign of Jonah. In the Bible, there's this story of a man named Jonah, and he's swallowed by a fish, right? So this chapter, Matthew 12, the sign of Jonah, it says, "Then some of the Pharisees and the Sadducees are different groups of Jews. Then some of the Pharisees and teachers of the law said to him," Jesus, "Teacher, we want to see a sign from you." Like they're asking for a miracle, right? He answered, "A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given it except the sign of the prophet Jonah." All right? "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." So, that is the fish that swallowed Jonah, the fish of Pisces, which is the astrological age of Jesus. When is the age of Pisces? From 1 BC to 2150 AD. Okay, we're in 2025. So Jesus was ushering in the astrological age of Pisces, prophesizing of the astrological age of Aquarius. Moses ushers in the astrological age of Aries. All right, it seems like we could say the Bible seems to begin with the ushering in of the astrological age of Taurus, or it starts somewhere within the astrological age of Taurus, okay? So, like I said, annually, throughout each month, it goes one way, clockwise, but let's say universally, for each astrological age, it goes the other way. So, for example, with the current astrological age that we're in, Pisces, it would go from essentially, in a sense, how we said earlier, between the solstices and equinoxes, it was the last day of Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius. We could also say it's simultaneously, as a transition, the first day of Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Okay? So, let's say with our current astrological age, for the sake of conversation, just to keep it simple, it starts, the first day of spring is the first day of Aries, which is symbolized as the ram. When the sun passes into Aries season, that is the burnt offering, the burnt sacrifice of the lamb. Mary had a little lamb. That's Jesus. The sun passing into the astrological season of Aries, which is the burnt offering or sacrifice of the lamb. Okay? With the first day of spring, resurrection, new life. And then, for example, when Jesus is talking about, 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, he's talking about how, essentially, to try and simplify this quickly for you guys, for summer and spring, for spring and summer, let's just say for the sake of conversation, the sun is ascending. And then for fall and winter, the sun is descending. At the summer solstice, the sun reaches its highest point, and at the winter solstice, the sun reaches its lowest point. That's where the sun is in the heart of the earth, at its lowest point in its declination, in its descension, right? And it seems to rest there for 3 days and 3 nights. At the winter solstice, which is December 21st, December 22nd, 3rd, and 4th, the sun is at its lowest point for 3 days. And then December 25th, the sun begins to rise again. The sun has risen, right? So that's Jesus in the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights, okay? And that's why we don't celebrate the first day of the new year on the first day of spring, because from December 25th, God creates the heavens and the earth in 7 days. December 25th, 26th, 7, 8, 9, 30, 31st, January 1st is the first day of the new year. Why does God create the heavens and the earth in 7 days? Because back in the day, there were 5 visible planets to the naked eye: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then the sun and the moon. So Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the sun and the moon. That's why it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday is the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Sunday is the sun day, Monday is the moon day, all the way to Saturday is Saturn day. It's all the planets. That's why there's 5 books of Moses for the 5 visible planets, the 5 senses, okay? So, in other ways, like for example, since Jesus, right, is crucified on December 21st, the last day of Sagittarius, the symbol for the zodiac sign Sagittarius is the centaur, which is the top half of a man and the bottom half of a horse. And the man's always holding a bow and arrow. So he's called the archer or the hunter. That's why Jesus gets pierced in his side. Jesus is born in a stable because being crucified at the winter solstice, right, he's reborn in between Sagittarius and Capricorn, the horse and the goat, right? And then when it comes to Easter, right, that's the transition between Aries and Taurus season, the sheep and the bull, which are all cattle, which is why Jesus is born in a stable, because, he's crucified and then resurrected after 3 days around the winter solstice in between Sagittarius and Capricorn. And then, the resurrection, right? The crucifixion and resurrection as birth and rebirth for winter and spring. Spring having to do with Easter and whatnot. Around Aries and Taurus season is the lamb and the bull. The calf, which is all cattle. That's why he's born in a stable. Okay? So, right? Jesus is the sun. Mary Magdalene is the moon. The 12 disciples are the 12 zodiac signs. Mother Mary is the zodiac sign Virgo, because Jesus is born in the city of Bethlehem, which translates to the house of bread, which is the zodiac sign Virgo. All right? But since there's only 12 zodiac signs, and Mother Mary is one of the 12 zodiac signs as Virgo, the other 12 disciples are coming from the other 11 zodiac signs, where one of those signs is Gemini, symbolized as the twins. So there's 12 zodiac signs. You get rid of Virgo from Mother Mary. Now we have 11 left, right? So the other 11 zodiac signs would be the 11 disciples, but one of those 11 zodiac signs is Gemini, symbolized as the 2 brothers, the twins. So that's where we get the 12 disciples, apart from Virgo, Mother Mary, and Mary Magdalene, the moon. Okay? So, there's a lot that I'm trying to explain. Like, for example, Jesus is born in Virgo, which is essentially August 23rd to September 22nd. And then when he's about 30 years old, he's crucified, and that's because in 30 days later, in Scorpio, October 24th, that's when he's handed over by Judas, which is symbolized as Scorpio, leading up to Sagittarius, which is the winter solstice. Okay? Jesus being crucified in Sagittarius, right? So from Virgo to Scorpio, 1, 2, 3, right? He's betrayed by Judas. Scorpio, he's handed over, crucified in Sagittarius. From Sagittarius, 1, 2, 3 to Aquarius. That's why Jesus is baptized at 30. All right? It's always the number 3. 3 days in the tomb. 3 days from Virgo, Libra to Scorpio. He's handed over, crucified in Sagittarius. From Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius. He's baptized by John the Baptist, which is the Zodiac sign Aquarius. Okay? So there's all these different things, right? Jesus says, in his right hand are the sheep, and his left hand are the goats. That's because the first day of, right, the spring equinox, the first day of spring, is the first day of Aries season. The winter solstice, the first day of winter, is the first day of Capricorn season, symbolized as the sheep and the goat. So the right hand of God is the right side of earth, where the sun rises in the east. That's why we call it Easter, not Wester. The left hand of God is the left side of earth, where the sun sets in the west, representing new life, resurrection, death, crucifixion, sheep and goat. Okay? So that's why we say that we write with our right hand. We are a righteous person, because the right hand of God is the right side of earth. And in another sense, it's the right hemisphere of the brain. Right? The tabernacle of the sun is the tent of the soul, the mind within the body, the temple of God, the Christ on the cross, right? It's all a reflection, inner and outer, higher and lower, upper and lower, whatever. Okay? So that's where all these different things come from. This is how the secret of Jesus's thing plays out, right? Jesus comes into the city riding a donkey. The summer solstice is essentially the last day of Gemini, but the first day of Cancer. And within the Zodiac sign Cancer, there's 2 stars called the northern and southern donkeys, which is also called the manger. Okay? We'll get to that in a second. So that's to give you guys a little bit of sneak peek into kind of like how this plays into the story of Jesus and whatnot. All right? Jesus feeds the 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread, a reflection of, let's say, the 5 senses, the 5 visible planets. And there's 12 basketfuls left over. That's the 12 zodiac signs. In other gospels, he feeds thus 4,000 with 7 loaves of bread, and then there's 7 basketfuls left over. The 7 loaves can be the 7 celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And then it could be also the 7 chakras. And there's also the 7 sisters, the 7 stars of the Pleiades star system, right? If we go to Revelation 5, Revelation chapter 5, we have to go to the King James Version. And it's talking about the book of life. The book of life is essentially the body. This is talking about the 7 chakras, right? So let's do this real quick. How many chakras are there? While there are varying perspectives, the most commonly recognized number of chakras is 7. Then we go to Revelation 5. We're talking about the book of life, which is essentially the body. And I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within, and on the back side, sealed with 7 seals. It's talking about the 7 chakras, right? Ascending the spine, which is the rod that Moses uses to, send the 10 plagues down, okay? So, the 7 loaves being the 7 celestial bodies, the 7 basketfuls could be the 7 chakras, the 7 stars, the 7 sisters of the Pleiades star system. All right, so this is a little sneak peek as to like what all these things really represent. All right, so I'm sorry that I kind of I'm bouncing around and I'm throwing a lot at you guys at one time. It's just there's so much context to be provided. There's so much to cover. And I want to try to get as much as I can out in this one video. So getting back to the tribes of Israel, right? Just one sec. All right. So as we said, right, there's actually, you know what? There's one last thing that I want to get into before we actually get into the 12 sons of Jacob. I think that's what we'll wrap back around to. We'll end it with that. Blah, blah, blah. Come on. Computer's being slow. How many chakras? We're going to go to Exodus 3:14. This is the whole point of what the Bible's trying to tell you. And I just can't understand how people miss this. I just don't get it. People really got to start thinking for themselves. Like, we do it to ourselves. I just don't get it. I don't know. I'm going to show you guys what I mean in one sec, right? So this is talking about Moses in the burning bush where he meets God face to face. He's introduced to God. He discovers the name of God, right? Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Actually, I just want to see what Horeb means in Hebrew, because I'm sure there's some meaning to that. Horeb meaning in Hebrew, desert, dry, or desolation. Okay, so it essentially represents atheism, right? The mountain is the body, the peak is the brain, the burning bush is the thinking mind, the desert becomes paradise. You go from atheism to mysticism, which is through the intuition of self-knowledge found in meditation, which is self-reflection, right? Self-observation and contemplation. So, came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight. Why the bush does not burn up? Okay? And so the reason why that is because Moses is ushering in the astrological age of Aries, where Joseph is, that's all happening in the astrological age of Taurus, which is before Aries, and then after Moses is Jesus with Pisces. And then the next will be Aquarius. So as we can see here, there is an associated symbol, gender, and element for each zodiac sign, right? Another reason as to why when it comes to the tribes of Judah, Reuben, Ephraim, and Dan being Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, it's actually earth, fire, water, and wind, which is the 4,000 that Jesus fed with the 7 loaves. Our fourfold nature of earth, fire, water, air. Okay? Which is aligned with, for the tribes of Israel, that's also aligned with the 4 cardinal points on a compass: north, south, east, west. Earth, fire, water, air. Spring, summer, fall, winter. The equinoxes and the solstices. You see how this all plays out, right? So that's why the 4 tribes are set up where they are. You have to rotate the zodiac back so that Taurus aligns with the first day of spring, March 20th. So that's why, right? Ephraim is the ox for spring. Judah is the lion for summer. Dan is the eagle, which was the old symbol for Scorpio for fall. And Reuben is Aquarius for winter. All right? North, south, east, and west. So, as we had saw earlier, right? I think now we can get back to the 12 sons of Jacob. So we saw Reuben, turbulent as the waters, and his symbol for his camp, the camp of Reuben, is the man. So the man, turbulent as the waters, is Aquarius, as we saw. Then we head into Simeon and Levi. Simeon and Levi are brothers, the twin brothers of Gemini. Blah, blah, blah. For they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. And that has to do with, within the astrological age of Taurus, the last day of Taurus into the first day of Gemini would be the spring equinox, the first day of spring, which is the sacrifice of the bull, into the twins of Gemini, the hamstringing of the bull. All right? Judah, you are a lion's cub. Judah, like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares to rouse him? That's common sense, that's Leo. Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His border will extend towards Sidon. All right? The seashore is where land and sea meet, which is the symbol for the zodiac sign Capricorn, the top half of a goat and the tail of a fish, the seashore, where land and water meet. His border will extend towards Sidon, which means fishery and or fishing or hunting place. Obviously, Capricorn is the bottom half, the tail of a fish. And the hunting place that Capricorn borders is Sagittarius, represented as the archer, the hunter. Okay? So Zebulun is Capricorn. Then it says Issachar. Where is it? Issachar is a strong ass crouching down between 2 burdens. An ass is an old-fashioned word for donkey. But again, when Jesus is riding into the city on a donkey, it's symbology for discovering heaven within. Why do you think we call this your ass? This is the donkey that Christ is riding into heaven on. It's spiritual. It's spiritual, right? Issachar is the constellation Cancer. In the constellation Cancer, the 2 stars known as the donkey stars are Acellus Borealis and Acellus Australis. They are located on either side of the Beehive cluster, which is also in Cancer. Ancient sky watchers associated these stars with donkeys because they appeared to be feeding at a manger, which is represented by the Beehive cluster. So these are the northern and southern donkeys, the 2 burdens of Issachar, the ass, right? This is also called the manger because the first day of Cancer is the summer solstice, right? The crowning of the king, Christ Jesus. It's a kind of birth of the sun in another sense, if you will, right? So that's the other manger. Now what else? Next up, Issachar is Cancer. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that bites the horse's heels so that his rider shall fall backward. And that has to do with Scorpio. Dan is Scorpio next to Sagittarius, the horse rider falling backwards, because back in the age of Taurus, if you rotate the zodiac back, the fall equinox would have happened on the last day of Scorpio into the first day of Sagittarius. And that's the horse rider falling back as the sun ascending in spring and summer, and then the last day of Scorpio, the first day of Sagittarius, right? The scorpion or snake bites the horse's heels, the rider's falling back, now the sun is descending. Fall and winter. So spring and summer is the ascending, fall and winter is the descending. Spring is like sunrise, summer is like daytime, fall is like sunset, winter is like nighttime. All right. So at the fall equinox, where the scorpion's biting at the horse's heels, the horse rider's falling backwards, represents the sun descending with sunset into nighttime, fall into winter. All right, so that's where Dan is the scorpion of Scorpio, the eagle, as we saw with the tent. Same with Judah, the lion. Leo is the sign for the tent, right? Then we have Gad. Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. A troop is an army of soldiers. The military zodiac sign is Aries, all right, ruled by the planet Mars, which is the military planet, the war god. So Gad is also typically symbolized as I think, what is it? I think it's essentially like a fortress for like warriors. They were the warrior tribe. All right, so Gad is Aries. Out of Asher, his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. That's because if we rotate the zodiac back to the age of Taurus, the summer solstice would have been on the last day of Leo season, the lion. That's why we call it Lion King, being crowned at the peak of summer, or peak in terms of the sun's ascending, right? But obviously the first day of summer is not the hottest day of summer. The hottest day of summer is peak summer, which is midsummer, which would have fallen in the middle of Libra season in the age of Taurus. And that's following the zodiac sign Virgo, which is called the house of bread. So at the summer solstice, the Lion King is crowned. Then we head into Virgo season, which is the house of bread. And then we reach the middle of Libra season, which is peak summer, midsummer. Now, after the Lion King has been crowned and we've passed through the house of bread, our bread is fat, and we're reaping the benefits of midsummer. We're in midsummer, where the symbol for the zodiac sign Libra is the scales, and so everything is in perfect balance, and we've reached peak summer. All right, and our bread is fat. I just want to search up this one thing. What are houses in astrology? In astrology, houses are the 12 divisions of a birth chart, each representing a different area of life and how planetary energies manifest. They are like stages where the planets perform, each one relating to a specific aspect of life experience, from personal identity to relationships, career, and spirituality. The houses are numbered counterclockwise, starting with the ascendant or rising sign. So that's why when Jesus was telling the disciples to go into the house of the man holding the pitcher of water, right? Virgo is the house of bread. Our bread shall be fat, with Asher, Libra. So Asher is Libra. Naphtali is a hind, let loose. He giveth goodly words. A hind or a doe is a female deer. So obviously, if Naphtali is one of the 12 sons and he's being called a female deer, that's Virgo. Okay, Mother Mary. When it comes to Joseph, it says, the archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. So that obviously has to do with Sagittarius, the centaur, the top half of a man, the bottom half of a horse. The man is always holding a bow and arrow. The symbol for Sagittarius is always a bow and arrow. So Joseph is Sagittarius. The last one is Benjamin. Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. That has to do with Pisces. Benjamin is Pisces because spring, summer, and fall is sunrise, daytime, sunset. Winter is nighttime at the winter solstice, where back in Taurus season, the winter solstice would have been the last day of Aquarius into the first day of Pisces. The two fish, which is Benjamin the wolf, right, hunting the prey throughout the day. Now we've reached the winter solstice of the nighttime of winter. And through the two fish, we divide the spoil of the winter solstice, because in spring, you plant seeds. In summer, they ripen. They grow and ripen. In fall, that's harvest season. They're harvested. And in winter, you divide the spoil in the sense that you store the food. Okay? So that's where Benjamin is Pisces, dividing the spoil between the two fish at the winter solstice. Winter being nighttime is storage season. All right? But if you noticed, we missed one. Because as we just saw, we have every sign except Taurus, right? Reuben is Aquarius, Simeon and Levi is Gemini, Judah is Leo, Zebulun is Capricorn, Issachar is Cancer, Dan is Scorpio, Gad is Aries, Asher is Libra, Naphtali is Virgo, Joseph is Sagittarius, and Benjamin is Pisces. The 13th child, Dinah, the daughter, is the moon. Where is Taurus? That's where we have to go to Deuteronomy. In the KJV, and it says, talking of Moses' blessings of Joseph and his sons, it says, speaking of Joseph's sons and whatnot, his glory is like the firstling of his bullock. Bullock is a bovine is essentially a bull, okay? And his horns are like the horns of unicorns. And what's a unicorn? It's a horse with a horn. So, in this weird way, right, we start off with the 12 sons of Jacob. One of those 12 sons is Joseph. Joseph has two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. When it comes to the 12 sons becoming the 12 tribes of Israel, Joseph is replaced by Ephraim and Manasseh, his two sons. As it just said, right, we saw the sign for the tribe of Ephraim is the ox, or the calf, which is Taurus. So where Ephraim is Taurus, it says Manasseh, his horn is like a unicorn. So he is replacing Joseph as Sagittarius, because Joseph is the archer, the top half of the centaur. Manasseh is the unicorn, the horse, the bottom half of the centaur. And then the unicorn has one horn. Ephraim, the ox, is the other horn of Taurus. So between Ephraim and Manasseh, you have the two horns of Taurus. But through Manasseh and Joseph, you have the horse body and the man top, the man archer of Sagittarius. So interestingly, between Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh, it's this weird fusion of the zodiac signs Taurus and Sagittarius, okay? So when it comes to going back to Moses on the mountain, because I think I trailed off and I never got around to that. The sign for Moses is ushering in the astrological age of Aquarius. I'm sorry, the astrological age of Aries, right? So the element for the zodiac sign Aries is fire. That's why Moses ushering in the astrological age of Aries is meeting God face to face in the burning bush, the fire of the astrological age of Aries. All right. Now Moses goes up and down the mountain a couple times. One of the times he comes down the mountain, let's see where it is. Is it here? Yep. Moses was taking a long time talking to God at the top of the mountain. So the Israelites, the Jews, wanted to create their own God to worship. So they're talking to Moses' brother Aaron, and Aaron answers them and says, "Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing. Bring them to me." So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf. Okay? So Moses ushers in the astrological age of Aries. He comes back down the mountain, and they've created an idol, which is a golden calf that they're worshiping, representing how they're still holding on to the astrological age of Taurus. But now Moses has just ushered in the astrological age of Aries. So that's why that is the case for that. I think the last thing that we'll end this off on, right, is Moses speaking to God in the burning bush. All right, and this is the whole point of everything we're showing here. So God is finally introduced to the reader. Moses introduces us to God, right? Moses in the burning bush, he's talking to God. Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you.' And they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you." Right? So, if I ask you who was the first president of the United States, your one and only answer is George Washington. If I ask you who is God, your one and only answer is I am. Okay? When it's said, "I am has sent me to you," that's like saying, right? This is what you are to say to the Israelites. It's like saying, instead of saying, "This is what you are to say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you," it's like saying, "This is what you are to say to the Israelites, George Washington has sent me to you." So if God says, "This is what you are to say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you," and who is God? I am. I am sent me to you. Okay? I am who I am. Okay, so that's why you don't need the Bible. That's what all this is, an external representation of the nature of God, the knowledge of who I am as I am. I know who I am because I am who I am. All right? That is the absolute way, truth, and life of the intuition of self-knowledge. The knowledge of who I am as I am. The immortal being of eternal life as God. That is the revelation of eternal life. Okay? That's the salvation of eternal life, where death no longer conquers us. We discover our divinity and immortality. All right? That's what this astrotheology and whatnot is representing. It's a spiritual transformation going on inside of you. Okay? So that's essentially it for this video. There's a lot more for me to go into, but I don't want to make these videos too long, and I think this gives you guys enough context for now. Touches up on enough stuff for this video. And then I can continue to expand upon this in further videos, all right? So that's pretty much it. Right? Who is God? I am. That's the whole point of everything that I've just told you today. I just don't understand. That's what I was trying to say earlier. I'm just like, I don't understand how people miss that. Like, I just don't get that. Like what are we missing? You know? If you asked Moses, who is God? He would have said, I am. If you asked Jesus, who is God? He would have said, I am. Before Abraham was, I am. Quoting Exodus 3:14. I am who I am. Who is God? I am. Be still and know that I am God. I don't understand how people don't get that. You know, that's the whole point. So watch my other videos and you guys can understand how we're all gods as different incarnations of God. Right? To be a god is to be an incarnation of God. So we are the gods as the incarnations of God. Okay? So, right? Is it not written in your law, I have said ye are gods, quoting the Psalms. I said, ye are gods, children of the Most High. We're all gods as incarnations of God. Therefore, we are all God in the flesh. Who is God? I am. Okay? That is the absolute way, the truth, and the life of the intuition of self-knowledge. That is the salvation of eternal life, the revelation of oneself as the immortal being in a mortal body. Right? That's the understanding of who I am as God. I am who I am. So that's the whole point. Okay? So you guys can watch my other videos to understand how that makes sense. But I think that just about touches up on enough for what we need to understand for this video. I don't think there's much else that I can really say. So I'll continue to expand upon this in other videos. But that's essentially the difference between the sons of Joseph, the disciples of Jesus. Joseph is like the prototype for the story of Jesus. So go and read the Bible, read the story of Joseph, and then read the story of Jesus. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing, right? Each sign of the Zodiac is only 30 degrees. Times 12 is the 360 degrees of the Zodiac circle. That's why Jesus is betrayed for 30 coins of silver, right? He's crucified at 30. He's in the tomb 3 days. He's baptized at 30. His ministry is for about 3 years. He dies at 33. It's always the number 3 because of the winter solstice and the 3 days that the sun is in the tomb of the heart of the earth at its lowest point. Then on December 25th, it starts to rise again. So you guys can search these things up. Oh, search up this book. There's an audio book. It's kind of wonky, but there's an audio book on YouTube. It's called The Christ Conspiracy. It'll tell you all these things. They have a different interpretation of the 12 sons of Jacob than I do. I think I'm more correct than they are, but that's where you can understand a lot of these things much better. So search up that book called The Christ Conspiracy. It's a 2-part audiobook on YouTube. All right, and that will help you to understand a lot of these things. And search up this man. His name is William Donahue, Bill Donahue, and you'll be able to learn all these things through him as well. Okay, so just research this stuff on your own. It's out there. It's just private knowledge. It's not public knowledge, okay? People don't want you to look into astrology because if you do, then you'll find out the secrets of the Bible. So the last thing that I'll end this on is that, does this mean that Jesus was never a real person, never lived a real life? Absolutely not. Jesus was obviously a real person who obviously lived a real life. And he obviously died the death that he died because of teaching the things that he taught. Okay? Now, the Romans were mocking the Jews by crucifying Jesus and making an example of him. But by doing so, they were fulfilling the prophecy of the Jews, making Jesus the Messiah. Okay? Because of that inspired the early Christian movement, which had a lot of momentum and a lot of power behind it. It's one of those things where it's like, you can't beat them, join them. So the Romans saw an opportunity to take advantage of that by essentially taking over the early Christian movement, making it their own, making Jesus, this real person who lived a real life, the face of the movement after killing him, right? Blaming the Jews. And they wrote the New Testament in Greek. The early Jews would have spoke Hebrew and Aramaic, maybe some Greek. The Romans would have spoke Latin and Greek. And so they would have been the ones to write the New Testament in Greek, taking over the story of Jesus and writing that story specifically as it's written in the Bible by using the myth of the sun, which is a story that's shared throughout many different cultures. And it's very difficult to find information on that because it's very much a conspiracy. You know, people don't want you to know that that story has been shared amongst other gods and other cultures. Okay, so they took that same shared story and applied it to Jesus and basically capitalized and monopolized that story and hid from everyone else how that story is kind of shared with other gods, okay? So if there is a conspiracy, it's not that Jesus was not a real person and didn't live a real life. Jesus was 100% a real person who lived a real life. Jesus was not only alive and living, but he's eternally living right here, right now, in us all, the Christ within. But his life story as it's written in the Bible is the myth of the Son, as we just saw, okay? So I hope this helps you guys. Research into the Christ Conspiracy book and William Donahue, and just search different videos, read different articles online, and you'll be able to find this information for yourself. So I love you guys. I hope I blew your mind, and I'm going to continue to expand upon this in further videos. So I'll see you soon.